All right, here we go. The battle of the tablets. The two high-end tablets that are available now, the Apple iPad 2 and the Motorola XOOM tablet, the first ever Android 3.0 honeycomb tablet. The best tablets on the market right now. Now, before I get into any comparisons between the two devices, it's important to know where I'm coming from on this. I was an Apple user for about 8 years. I've had 4 Mac computers, a G4 Power Mac, 2 iMacs, and a MacBook. I also have had 3 iPods, including the original iPod and the one that I currently have, which is a 5th generation iPod. So I've been an Apple user, and I think that they do make great products. But I also know that they are not the only company that makes great products. There are many other companies out there that make great products, great computing products. I'm open to new things, new operating systems, and that's why I am an Android user. So I have given a lot of time to Apple, and I have been an Android user from the start. So I think I have a good background. I'm not particularly biased towards any one company, and this is not going to be one of those reviews where one company is buried over the other. I think that both tablets are great choices. The thing is that not everybody drives the same vehicle, and we shouldn't all drive the same car. So personal preference factors into this quite a bit. But what this review and comparison is going to focus on are the pros and the cons of each device. I'm going to go and start with the concrete differences between these two devices. Now, if there's something that I see that is concrete, an advantage for the iPad, I'm going to put a number here, and we're going to have a running tally here of whenever I mention something that the iPad is superior to the XOOM, I will put a number here, and it will just keep going. The same is true over here. I'm going to keep a number, a rolling tally, for every pro that the Motorola XOOM has over the Apple iPad 2. Now, before I go any further, I have to say that this product category wouldn't be as we know it today if it wouldn't be for Apple. Apple is a trailblazer in a lot of ways because they believe in their products and they put their full weight behind the products. It's not every product that they do. I mean, the Apple TV is a good example of a product that they're not really fully behind and they don't fully support. But a high-end product like the Apple iPad is something that they throw their full weight behind, and they're not afraid to blaze a trail. That being said, Fords were the first mass-produced vehicles, and not everybody drives a Ford. So just because you're the second to market doesn't mean that you don't build upon, and doesn't mean that you are not just as valid as something that was a trailblazing product. Because let's be honest, the iPad was not the first tablet computer. Just like the iPhone was not the first cell phone. So these are just, everything is iterative. Everything iterates on everything else. So just keep that in mind, okay? I give Apple its due, its credit, for blazing the trail in this product category. But that alone is not going to make me recommend this device to anybody, or not recommend it. But I just wanted to get that out of the way first before we get into the comparison here. Now, the first thing that you'll notice is that they're very similar in size, but the Apple iPad has a 4:3 aspect ratio. Now that is similar, or actually that's the same as your old television sets were. So of course it would be this way, but so that's the same aspect ratio of a television set, an old TV, the old tube TVs. The Motorola XOOM has a 16:10 aspect ratio. Now what that is it's a little bit bigger than the regular widescreen aspect ratio of your current day LCD television sets. Your current day LCD television sets are 16:9. So it's a little bit bigger. And that allows for a little space like this menu at the bottom. So let's flip this sideways. But another reason I think that they didn't go with the full 16 by 9 on it is that it would make the tablet thinner. So to make it a little more usable, I think they went with a 16:10, which I think is a good idea. Okay, I have both tablets laying side by side. Now, the Motorola XOOM is designed to be in landscape mode. So it's designed to be this way because you've got your front-facing camera up here and it's designed to be held like that. The iPad 2 is designed to be held in portrait mode. You have your front-facing camera up here, and that's just the two differences between the devices. There's no pros, there's no cons of either one. That's just the way they were designed. The first thing you'll notice is that the iPad is taller, or in this case it's taller, but it's wider than the Motorola XOOM. However, the Motorola XOOM is a little bit longer. Let me put them together here. Just by a little bit on the side. And that's because the aspect ratios on the screens are different. Now, you'll see here I have two of my videos, the same video actually, pulled up on both devices here. Now the first thing we're going to cover is the screen. Now the screen on the Apple iPad, the resolution on it is 1024 by 768. Okay? The screen resolution on the Motorola XOOM is 1280 by 800. So the screen resolution on the XOOM is better than the Apple iPad. So you get a better pixel density on there, and you just get a more screen real estate as well because of the way they chose to do the widescreen on it. So as you can see, the same video is here on both devices, and on the iPad, just because of the aspect ratio that they chose, ends up with letterboxing. So your content ends up being smaller. So I'm going to play both videos on both devices here. And I have the sound down so you don't have to hear it. But as you can see, you get much more screen real estate over on the Motorola XOOM. So for screen, because of the pixel density and the resolution and the larger screen real estate for really not being much of a larger device, I'm going to have to give the first point to the Motorola XOOM. Now, as you know, when you measure screen size, you measure it diagonally. The measurement on the Apple iPad 2 is a 9.7-inch screen. The measurement on the Motorola XOOM is a 10.1-inch screen. It's a slightly larger screen, but the device isn't much larger than the iPad. They're very comparable in size. Okay, the next thing that we're going to cover is the actual device itself. Now they both have very strong builds. They both feel like very sturdy devices. The Motorola XOOM has quite a weight to it. It's much heavier than the iPad, okay? And it's thicker. I'll see if I can give you a representation here, how much thicker. That's the thickness of both devices there. So the Apple iPad 2 is lighter and thinner. So it makes it a lot easier to hold in your hand because, again, this is not a device you sit down on a table. I mean, you could lay it down on a table, but most of the time you're actually holding it. So for that reason, we're going to have to give a point to the Apple iPad just because you're going to be holding this. You don't want to be holding something that's not necessarily that it's heavy. It's not like you're lifting weights when you operate this device over here. But it is when you constantly have to hold it, you notice the weight. So anything that's lighter and thinner is definitely a plus in this situation. So like I said, we're going to have to give the point to the iPad here in this case. Now, one of the big upgrades on the iPad are the cameras. You have a front-facing camera and a rear-facing camera. Those are things that were not on the original iPad. The Motorola XOOM, being that that's the first generation device, it came with it right off the bat. So they both have front-facing cameras and rear-facing cameras. The front-facing camera on the Apple iPad is a VGA quality camera. If you don't know what that is, it means it's less than 1 megapixel. The same is true for the camera on the back. This camera here is also less than 1 megapixel. On the Motorola XOOM, the front-facing camera is right over here, and that camera is a 2 megapixel camera. On the rear of the device, you have your rear-facing camera right here, and that is a 5 megapixel camera, and it has a dual LED flash back here. The iPad does not have a flash on the back. So as for cameras on the device, which was, like I said, one of the big upgrades on the iPad, we're going to have to give this one to the Motorola XOOM because the cameras are superior. A 2 megapixel camera and a 5 megapixel camera is way better than a less than 1 megapixel camera. Now both devices have a dual core processor in them. Apple never really gets too specific on the specs because they want you to focus on the experience, the user experience, rather than what's under the hood. So no one really is quite sure the processing power of the Apple A5 dual-core chip. But we will be doing, towards the end of this video, we're going to be doing a performance between the two devices and see if we can see if one is better than the other. But both devices have dual-core processors in them. Now the Motorola XOOM has 1 gigabyte of RAM in it. The Apple iPad has 512 megabytes of RAM in it. So the XOOM has twice the RAM that the Apple iPad does. But again, this all falls into performance. So the processor and the RAM, that's all going to show what kind of user experience you get. So we're going to throw that to the end of the video and decide which is better. But just remember, the specs on the Motorola XOOM a little bit outweigh the Apple iPad. Now this Apple iPad 2 is a 64 gigabyte version, the Wi-Fi version. This Motorola XOOM is a 32 gigabyte 3G device. Right now that's the only way the Motorola XOOM comes. It comes in one flavor, it comes in 32 gigabytes, and you get 3G with an upgradable 4G on it. The iPad comes in a lot of flavors. You can get it in 6 different configurations. You can get a 16 gigabyte, a 32 gigabyte, and a 64 gigabyte in Wi-Fi, and then you can get a 16 gigabyte, a 32 gigabyte, and a 64 gigabyte with 3G. So for that reason, you get a lot of different price points for the Apple iPad. So in this category, we're going to have to give it to the iPad because you have a lot of options. More people can choose what they want and how they want to get in and what they want to pay for the device. So if you want the high-end tricked out option, you can go with that and pay more, or you can go with the lowest, the low-end option, which is $499, and pay the least. Just one thing to note, the Apple iPad, the highest end option is more expensive than the Motorola XOOM, but they have 6 SKUs for the iPad, and only one of them is more expensive than the Motorola XOOM. So in this category, because of price and variety, we're going to have to give it to the iPad. Now both devices are very comparable in a couple of ways, one of which being Wi-Fi. They have the same Wi-Fi. They both support 802.11a, b, g, and n. They have the same Bluetooth specs. They both have accelerometers. They both have gyroscopes. And the only difference is that the Motorola XOOM actually has a barometer in it. So as of now, we're not going to actually give a point for that because there's no real apps that do that. But that's just something that you should know, that the XOOM actually does have a barometer in it, and that's one of the extra things in there that the iPad does not have. But like I said, it doesn't warrant giving a point to it unless there was some spectacular app that used it, which doesn't exist right now.